Welcome to session 7 in our series of webinars for people with coeliac disease. Today we'll be given some tips on eating out and whilst on holiday while following the gluten-free diet. My name's Leah Seamark and I'm a specialist gastroenterology dietitian from Somerset Partnership, and joining me today is Danielle Milne from Musgrove.
So a few tips to help you when eating out. So as we've discussed on the Gluten on the Move app and on the website, there is a Coeliac UK venue guide, which you can look for, which is recommendations from people with celiac disease. You can also look for this GF symbol, which is shown in the top right here. So this symbol identifies restaurants, cafes, which have been kind of audited by Coeliac UK and have been shown to provide an appropriate gluten-free menu. And I've also looked at kind of the preparation process to ensure that it's made in a gluten-free environment. It's also worth contacting your local support group for recommendations. So that's your sort of local Coeliac UK support groups. So often they have social media accounts, so for example, Facebook, and lots of people will post recommendations on those social media accounts. Some of the support groups will send out electronic newsletters with recommendations. And it's also worth looking at the support groups in your kind of surrounding area or any of the regions of the country that you regularly visit. Because if you're going on holiday somewhere in the UK or you visit family quite a lot, it might just be worth joining those local support groups as well to get those recommendations. And it's also worth calling ahead to talk to the chef or the waiting staff and making sure you explain that you have celiac disease and that you need to follow a gluten-free diet. These days, a lot of people are following gluten-free diets for various different reasons, and some people may not need to be as strict with their dietary restriction as people with celiac disease. So do make sure you explain you do have celiac disease and talk to them about some of those cross-contaminant issues that you might need to be aware of. Also make sure when you arrive there that you do explain to the staff again that you have celiac disease and what that's going to mean. And you can also check the allergen information on the menu. So if a restaurant or a cafe doesn't specifically have a gluten-free menu, you should by law be able to ask the food provider for that allergen information. So they should be able to tell you if gluten containing grain is which of their foods, and that might be in written format or they might provide it verbally. Any other tips that you would recommend, Danny?
Definitely agree with the calling ahead. I tell a lot of my patients to do that purely because I think, you've got to maintain a good quality of life and you've got to be able to go and do the things that you enjoy doing. If that's, going out for meals. I sometimes say, consider some of the cuisines that maybe use less gluten containing ingredients. If you're someone who likes to get a takeaway or go out for a curry, things like a lot of Chinese foods like to use a lot of soy sauce, a lot of wheat noodles, etc. So you might find it more difficult to get something that is gluten-free and free of contamination, whereas for example a lot of Indian food uses a lot of chickpea flour. A lot of their products can be more naturally gluten-free and can kind of make your decision a little bit easier. You have a bit more flexibility with the menu. The one thing I would say is if it was fine last time, it's always worth still mentioning it the next time you go. Chefs change, procedures change, and you just want to make sure that they are aware of your condition.
Brilliant, thank you. And I know Coeliac UK website has some information on there regarding some of those cuisine ideas that you mentioned there, so brilliant, thank you. Also looking at sort of going on holiday and travel, if you have the diagnosis of celiac disease, we want you to be able to go on your annual holidays. So it's just a few tips to help with that. If it's a UK-based holiday, as we mentioned, you can check the UK venue guide on your smartphone app or on the website. You can contact the local Coeliac UK group in the region of travel that you're going to and ask for recommendations. So that might be via the social media, or you can send the email to that local support group and see if they have a list of recommendations for you. Contact the hotel, the B&B to discuss your need for gluten-free diet. And like I said, it's worth mentioning that you do have celiac disease and you do need to be strictly gluten-free. And you may want to discuss with them as well sort of the risk of cross-contamination. And it's always worth just kind of carrying a supply of gluten-free snacks with you. So if you are out and about and struggling at all, you've got something if you need it. Obviously, if you're traveling abroad, one of the things I often say to patients is you may need to do a little bit more research and plan ahead a little bit. So the things that you can do to do that is contact the tour operator, the hotel, the B&B to discuss your need for the gluten-free diet. You can check with your airline and tour operator to make sure that you can actually take sealed packs of gluten-free food into the specific country that you're going to. You might need to declare it, but it's just worth double checking to make sure that you can do that. Some airlines might actually give you extra baggage allowance if you request it. So, for example, if you're going to a country where you feel that you're going to really struggle to get an adequate supply of gluten-free food, you may decide to take a stash with you, which is going to kind of increase your baggage allowance. So you may be able to request that extra baggage allowance, but your airline may actually ask for a letter from your GP just to confirm you have that diagnosis of celiac disease. It's also worth looking at the Coeliac UK website, because on that website, if you look under the holiday and travel section, there are a range of different country guides. So if you open up one of those guides, it will give you some information about how easy it is to follow a gluten-free diet in that country. It also gives you some useful translations. So it's got translations such as "I have celiac disease," "I need to follow a gluten-free diet," and some really key phrases that you might need to use in that country. It also gives you a list of the celiac organisations within that country, so it might be worth looking on their websites for that as well. And as I mentioned, explore the country's own local celiac disease organisations. You can download celiac translation cards from the internet, so again, that kind of gives you some of those key translations you might need when you're kind of eating out abroad in restaurants to kind of help explain what your dietary needs are. And again, it's worth kind of carrying that supply of gluten-free snacks if you need it, especially if kind of going to the airport, if plane's delayed at all, you might need to have that supply. Again, Danny, anything else you would recommend to our patients if they're travelling abroad or they're on holiday?
I'd go with what you've said about the translation cards. I think they're the best thing that you can take, because there's so many key phrases on there and you'll never remember them all, no matter how hard you try. Well, you might do if you can speak several languages, or you might think that you'll be okay, but certainly in an emergency you need to have a small supply of snacks on you. And the only thing I'll mention that I've seen on Coeliac UK is they do recommend mentioning it for your travel insurance as well.
Thank you very much for that, Danny, and thank you for listening, and we hope you join us for some future webinars.